The people who broke you thought they ended your story, but God is about to prove they only started your breakthrough. There are seasons in life when the wound of betrayal cuts so deep that it feels as though the very foundation of your trust has been shattered. It may come from a friend you cherished, a family member you believed in, or a partner you thought would never leave your side. And when it happens, the pain is not only in the act itself, but in the collapse of everything you believed about that relationship. You find yourself replaying moments, searching for the signs you missed, wondering how someone you loved could so easily choose to hurt you. In these moments, your heart aches not just from loss, but from confusion. The nights grow long, heavy with unanswered questions. Why did they do it? Why did God allow it? Was I not faithful enough? Was my love not strong enough? You may even feel abandoned, not only by them but by God Himself, as though He stood by silently while you were wronged. But betrayal, as devastating as it is never the end of the story. In the economy of heaven, nothing is wasted, not even the cruelest of wounds. What if the very thing meant to break you is the tool God uses to build you? What if the door that slammed shut was heaven's way of leading you into a new and greater room? What if this is not punishment, but preparation? The truth is, God's plan often unfolds in ways that seem utterly backward to us. He will sometimes allow a Judas into your life, not so you can be destroyed, but so you can be propelled into your destiny. That betrayal becomes the catalyst for a breakthrough you never saw coming. You cannot reach the resurrection without the cross. You cannot see the crown without first enduring the thorn. Think about it. The pain you carry now may be the very path to the promise you've been praying for. You see only the betrayal, but God sees the breakthrough. He sees the strength you are developing, the wisdom you are gaining, the faith that is being refined in the fire of your suffering. And one day when you look back, you will realize that those who hurt you were unknowingly participating in God's divine plan for your elevation. Not knowingly participating in God's divine plan for your elevation. Betrayal forces you to place your trust not in people, but in the one who will never fail you. People's loyalty is fragile, but God's promises are unshakable. People may lie, abandon, and wound, but God will heal, restore, and lift you higher than you ever imagined. He will prepare a table for you in the presence of those who thought they had ruined you, and He will turn your mourning into dancing. You do not need to seek revenge, because vengeance belongs to the Lord. You do not need to explain yourself, because time and truth will defend you. You do not need to fear the future, because the same God who allowed the breaking will bring forth the blessing. So, hold your peace. Stand firm, let the betrayal do its work, not in your destruction, but in your transformation. For what the enemy meant for evil, God is turning for good. Every tear you've cried is watering the soil of the breakthrough that is coming, and when it arrives, you will see that you did not lose, you were being positioned. You were not abandoned, you were being guided. And the wound that once felt like the end will be the very proof that God's plan was unfolding all along. When you are betrayed, the first instinct is to recoil in disbelief. Your heart tries to resist the truth because it feels safer to cling to the image you once had of that person rather than accept the reality of what they've done. Betrayal forces you to face a truth you never asked to see. It strips away the illusions, the masks, and the carefully crafted appearances people present to the world. What you once thought was loyalty is revealed to be convenience. What you once believed was love is exposed as self-interest. And while this revelation is devastating, it is also a gift, because living in the shadow of falsehood is far more dangerous than facing the pain of truth. God, in His mercy, allows certain betrayals to happen so that you are no longer walking blind. Sometimes the hand you were holding was secretly pulling you down. Sometimes the voice you trusted was quietly poisoning your spirit, and until that betrayal happened, you couldn't see it. It's uncomfortable to realize that God might permit someone to hurt you because the hurt becomes the very light that reveals their true nature. Think about this. If Judas had never betrayed Jesus, the disciples might have continued believing he was a faithful follower. The betrayal revealed what had been there all along, hidden beneath words of devotion. In your own life, the betrayal you suffered may not have created the disloyalty, it simply exposed it. And exposure, though painful, is necessary for freedom. God cannot bless the false version of your relationships. He cannot pour His best into a foundation built on pretense. That's why betrayal, as crushing as it feels, often marks the moment when God is clearing the stage of your life so He can fill it with the right people, the right opportunities, and the right blessings. You might not have had the strength to let go on your own. You might have continued giving, trusting, and pouring yourself into someone who was never going to return what you gave. But betrayal is like a door being slammed shut, not by the betrayer's hands alone, but by God's sovereign will. And once He closes that door, it is a mercy you will understand in time. So yes, betrayal cuts deep, but it cuts away the rot. It forces you to see the truth, even if that truth stings. And with truth comes the chance to walk forward, maybe limping at first, but freer than you've ever been. Because you now know who is truly with you and who was only pretending. And in God's eyes, that knowledge is not a loss, but the beginning of your protection. In seasons of betrayal, the ground beneath your feet feels unstable. The familiar support system you once relied on has collapsed, and the people you thought you could lean on have stepped back, or worse, turned against you. This loss of human security pushes you into a position you might not have chosen, but one that is profoundly transformative: dependence on God alone. It's human nature to anchor our trust in what we can see and touch. Friends, family, relationships, they feel tangible and safe. But when those pillars fall, you are forced to discover that your ultimate security was never meant to rest in them at all. Betrayal pulls away the temporary so that you can cling to the eternal. It is in those moments when you have no one else to run to that you discover the richness of running to God. When the sting of betrayal is fresh, prayer becomes less of a religious habit and more of a desperate lifeline. You find yourself talking to God not in formal, rehearsed phrases, but in raw, unfiltered honesty. The tears you cry are not just for the wound, but for the sudden awareness of how fragile human loyalty can be. And in that place of vulnerability, God meets you, not as a distant figure, but as a present comforter. Dependence on God does not mean you become weak. In fact, it is the opposite. It means you are now drawing strength from an unshakable source, rather than from people whose faithfulness can falter. Psalm 118:8 reminds us, "It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man." Betrayal etches that truth into your heart in a way nothing else can. It is no longer just a verse you read, it becomes the testimony you live. This deepened dependence changes you. You begin to measure relationships differently. You no longer cling to people out of fear of losing them because you know the one who holds you will never let you go. You stop chasing validation from those who withhold it because your worth is anchored in the one who created you. You stop trying to control the outcomes of human loyalty because you trust the one who controls the seasons of your life. And perhaps most importantly, dependence on God builds a peace that betrayal cannot shatter. When your faith is rooted in Him, The storms may still rage, but they cannot sweep you away. You learn to say, even if they walk away, even if they turn against me, I am not abandoned, God is here, and He is enough. Over time, this dependence transforms the very pain that drove you into His arms into the strength that keeps you there. And what began as a wound becomes a well, a deep reservoir of trust and intimacy with God that you carry into every future season of your life. Betrayal has a way of teaching you lessons that no book, lecture, or sermon could ever convey. It is an education of the heart, painful, yes, but invaluable. At first, the wound feels like an uninvited intruder, a sharp edge in your soul that you wish you could file down and forget. But as time passes, you begin to see that within the scar lies a gift: wisdom. Wisdom born from betrayal is different from ordinary caution. It is not the same as becoming cynical or suspicious of everyone. True wisdom doesn't shut your heart down, it refines it. It sharpens your discernment so that you can see beyond words and appearances into the reality of a person's character. It trains you to watch actions more than promises, consistency more than charm. You learn through painful experience that not everyone who claps for you is for you. You discover that loyalty is proven in silence and absence, not just in public affirmation. And most importantly, you begin to recognize the subtle red flags you once ignored, not because you were foolish before, but because your heart was open and you believed the best of others. Now your openness is paired with insight and your kindness is protected by boundaries. God allows this transformation because He knows where your journey is headed. The destiny He has for you requires you to be able to navigate relationships wisely. Some people are meant to walk with you only for a season, and others are meant to be kept at a distance altogether. Without the wisdom that comes from betrayal, you might allow the wrong voices to influence your future. Consider Joseph in the Old Testament. His brother's betrayal could have left him bitter, mistrusting, and unwilling to serve anyone again, but instead it taught him to see beyond immediate appearances. He learned how to interpret not just dreams, but also the character of those around him. That wisdom allowed him to serve in Pharaoh's court with excellence, to forgive his brothers without foolishly returning to vulnerability with them, and to lead a nation through famine. His wound became the very reason he could steward the position God gave him. In your own life, the same principle applies. Betrayal, when surrendered to God, matures you. It teaches you not only how to recognize the wrong people, but also how to treasure the right ones. You stop giving your pearls to swine, as Jesus warned, and instead you guard your heart so that your love can be poured into places where it will be valued and nurtured. And as you walk with this wisdom, you begin to see that the wound didn't just take something from you, it gave something to you. It gave you eyes that see more clearly, ears that hear beyond flattery, and a heart that understands the rare treasure of true loyalty. This is the kind of wisdom that protects you from future harm and equips you to live in alignment with God's plan for your life. A betrayal often feels like an interruption, a violent tearing away from the path you thought you were meant to walk. You had plans with this person. You envisioned a shared future, whether in friendship, family, or partnership. Their presence was woven into the fabric of your dreams, and when they tore themselves out of it, the whole design seemed ruined. But here is the paradox of God's work. What looks like a detour is often the true road you were meant to take all along. The loss you experienced is not a random misfortune. It is a divine redirection. God will sometimes allow certain relationships to crumble because their weight would have slowed you down or pulled you off course entirely. He will let the comfort of familiarity be replaced by the discomfort of loneliness, so that you will move toward the destiny He has prepared for you. It's easy to think that betrayal is about the person who hurt you, but often it's more about the place God is leading you. That loss becomes the force that moves you out of spaces you would never have left on your own. Left to yourself, you might have clung to them out of love, fear, or habit, but God sees the long road ahead, and He knows that their presence in your future would have been a hindrance, even if you couldn't see it. Think about the Israelites leaving Egypt. Their departure was not born from comfort, it was born from affliction. The hardship became the very thing that drove them into the freedom God had promised. In the same way, betrayal can serve as the breaking point that pushes you into new territory. You might not have left the old life willingly, but you will later see that it was necessary. This redirection doesn't just happen in grand, dramatic ways. Sometimes it's subtle. A shift in your career path because someone blocked an opportunity, a move to a new city because a relationship ended, a fresh calling into ministry or service because you no longer have the distractions you once did. What feels like the closing of one chapter is in reality the turning of the page to a far more important one. The key is to trust that God's hand is in the redirection, even when it feels like rejection. The enemy will try to convince you that you've been abandoned or that you've lost your way. But the truth is, you are still firmly in the grip of the one who orders your steps. Psalm 37:23 says, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delighteth in His way." Even the painful steps, even the ones stained with betrayal, are part of His plan to lead you where you are meant to be. And while you may not yet see the beauty in this path, you can walk with the assurance that God never wastes a loss. The betrayal you endured was not a derailment. It was the divine hand steering you toward the breakthrough that has been waiting for you all along. Betrayal always leaves you with a sense of loss. It's not just the person you lose, it's the moments you shared, the trust you gave, the dreams you built together. Sometimes it feels as though a part of your identity has been stripped away, as if you're left holding only the broken pieces of a life that once felt whole. And in the aftermath, your heart wonders, will I ever recover what I've lost? But here is a truth that betrayal cannot erase. God is a restorer. He does not simply replace what was taken, He multiplies it. He does not merely rebuild, He builds stronger, greater, and more beautiful than before. The restoration of God is not about returning you to where you were. It is about elevating you to where you were meant to be all along. Think of Job, who lost nearly everything, his wealth, his children, his health. Yet the end of his story was not in ashes, but in abundance. Scripture says, "The Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning." Job 42:12. That's what divine restoration looks like. It does not leave you in scarcity, it leads you into overflow. When betrayal robs you, God restores you in unexpected ways. It might come as new relationships that honor and value you far beyond what you've known. It might come as doors opening in your career that you never would have considered had you stayed in the comfort of the old path. It might even come as an inner peace and joy that surpass anything you thought possible. The beauty of God's restoration is that it often comes through avenues you couldn't have planned. You may not see the replacement for what was lost right away, and that can make the waiting hard. But waiting on God's restoration is not wasted time. It is preparation. It's the season where He strengthens your heart, heals your wounds, and aligns every detail so that when the blessing arrives, you are ready to receive it. And here's the powerful part. Restoration is not always about getting back the same thing. It's about receiving something better. You might lose a friend and gain a community. You might lose a job and gain a calling. You might lose one relationship and gain a deeper intimacy with God that becomes the foundation for every blessing that follows. So, while betrayal leaves a void, God's restoration fills it not with what you once had, but with something far greater. And when you see His hand at work, you will realize that the loss was not the end. It was the setup for a story you couldn't have written on your own. One of the most remarkable things about God is that He never wastes pain. What you walk through is not just for you. It becomes a testimony, a light, a guide for others who are stumbling through their own darkness. When betrayal has shattered your heart, it is natural to want to close yourself off, to keep your wounds hidden. But over time, as God heals you, those scars can become signposts for others who are traveling the same road you once walked. There is a unique power in the voice of someone who has endured and overcome. People can sense when you speak from theory and when you speak from experience. Your story carries weight because it is not borrowed wisdom. It has been forged in the fire of personal trial. The tears you cried, the nights you questioned, the prayers you prayed in desperation, all of it becomes part of a message that can reach places no generic encouragement ever could. And here's the miracle. God will often place in your path those who are experiencing the very pain you once felt. You will recognize the look in their eyes, the heaviness in their voice, because you've been there. And in that moment, your testimony becomes more than just words. It becomes proof that healing is possible, that restoration is real, and that God is faithful. This is not about putting your betrayal on display for sympathy. It's about allowing God to redeem it by using it as a tool for ministry. Your survival becomes someone else's hope. Your breakthrough becomes someone else's blueprint. The comfort you receive from God is the same comfort you now pass on to others, fulfilling the truth of 2 Corinthians 1:4. He comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort others. Sometimes, the very thing that once felt like the greatest shame becomes the platform for your greatest service. You may have thought the betrayal was meant to silence you, but God will turn it into the reason your voice carries more authority than ever. You may have thought it was the end of your influence, but God will use it to expand your reach. And as you see others find healing through your story, you will begin to understand one of the deepest truths about pain. It gains meaning when it is used for good. You will no longer look back on your betrayal as just a wound. You will see it as the moment God equipped you for a purpose bigger than yourself. Betrayal often feels like the closing of a chapter you are never ready to end. It can leave you wandering through the ruins of your plans, wondering if there's anything left worth building. But God specializes in rewriting stories. What feels like the end to you is often just the prologue to something greater He's preparing. The pain that once seemed pointless becomes the very soil in which your purpose begins to grow. Think of the greatest stories in Scripture: Joseph, David, Esther, Paul. All of them endured betrayal, rejection, or opposition at the hands of people they trusted. Yet each of them saw those very wounds become the reason they were positioned exactly where God needed them to be. Without betrayal, Joseph would have never made it to Egypt, where he would rise to save nations. Without Saul's jealousy and treachery, David might never have learned the humility and dependence that made him a king after God's own heart. In your own life, the betrayal you experienced is not an interruption to your calling, it's an essential part of it. The very thing that was meant to sideline you is what God is using to launch you into new assignments, new influence, and new opportunities. That's why He says in Isaiah 61:3 that He will give you beauty for ashes. The ashes are not wasted, they become the proof of the fire you survived and the foundation for the beauty He is about to create. Sometimes the greater purpose that comes from betrayal is internal. It's the transformation of your heart into one that is more compassionate, more discerning, and more resilient. Other times the purpose is external. It's the new mission God gives you to serve, lead, or speak into the lives of others. Either way, what was once your pain becomes your platform. And when you step into that purpose, you begin to see why God allowed you to walk this path. You realize that if you had never been broken in that way, you might never have been able to reach the people He has now entrusted to you. You understand that your story is not a story of defeat, but of divine strategy. The enemy's plan to destroy you has been dismantled and repurposed into a stage where God's glory can be displayed. Betrayal is one of life's most bitter experiences. It strikes at the core of our trust, leaving us questioning not only the people around us, but often our own worth and judgment. Yet in the hands of God, even betrayal becomes a tool for redemption. He allows it to reveal what you could not see, to deepen your dependence on Him, to turn your wounds into wisdom, to redirect your path, to restore what was lost, to help others heal, and to launch you into greater purpose. What the enemy intended for evil, God takes and weaves into a masterpiece that serves His glory and your good. The pain you feel today is not the end. It is a chapter in a much larger story, one that ends not in defeat, but in breakthrough. The God who allowed this season is the same God who will bring you out of it, stronger, wiser, and more aligned with His plan than ever before. So lift your head, dry your tears. Do not let betrayal define you. It is simply the turning point that sets you on the path toward your destiny. Trust Him when you can't trace Him. Believe Him when you can't see the ending. Your breakthrough is not just coming, it has already begun, and when it arrives, you will not only thank God for the blessing, but you will thank Him for the betrayal that made room for it.